the plane's 2 black boxes were recovered, but they were damaged to the point that some information was lost. It confirms the pilots put out no distress call, but did attempt to turn the plane around and land back at the Tehran airport. That was impossible, the report says, because the plane was engulfed in flames before it crashed. Iran initially said the cause was an engine fire, but Ukraine officials now say investigators are looking at multiple scenarios, including an anti-aircraft missile. The plane was headed to Kiev, where President Zelensky added a growing memorial yesterday.
We will surely find out the truth. For this purpose, a thorough and independent investigation will be conducted in accordance with international laws.
As I said, several former officials with the FAA and National Transportation Safety Board say an engine fire is unlikely the cause, given how fast the plane went down and the belief based on the debris field the plane broke up before hitting the ground. Many say an explosion or missile strike topped the list of possibilities. Canada is also calling for a transparent investigation. 63 of the victims were Canadian citizens, and most were headed back there after a connection in Kiev. Right now, the big question is, does Iran have the expertise to examine the black boxes? And if not, which country will do it? Harris?
Dan Springer, thank you very much. We'll have much more on this breaking news story later in the hour. I'm going to talk with an aviation safety consultant and former pilot, Mike Boyd. Watch for that. And this is also developing this hour. The House is poised to begin debate on a war powers resolution to limit President Trump's military actions against Iran. This, as the president says, new sanctions on Iran are in place now, one day after he backed off further aggression with the regime, calling for diplomacy and a new nuclear deal and for NATO to do more. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's not convinced that killing top Iranian General Soleimani was the right move.
And the view of many of us is not promoting peace, but an escalation. We certainly do not respect, and I, from my intelligence background, know just how bad Soleimani was. It's not because we expect good things from them, but we expect great things from us.
But President Trump is defending his role as commander-in-chief, saying he should not have to get congressional authorization to respond to active threats.
I don't have to, and you shouldn't have to be able, because you have to make split-second decisions sometimes. Sometimes you have to move very, very quickly, John. But in certain cases, I wouldn't even mind doing it. So you know what bothers me? When I see Nancy Pelosi trying to defend this monster.
I want to bring in now Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California, sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me today. So you just heard the president talking about there are certain instances, urgent ones, where, putting more constraint on war powers authorization could be problematic. Is there risk in that?
Well, Harris, first of all, no one is defending Soleimani. Everyone acknowledges that he has blood on his hands, that he killed Americans, that he's a bad actor. The point, though, is before you launch an attack on another state or a state actor like Soleimani, you have to come to Congress to seek authorization. The president didn't do this. Now, there is a limited self-defense exception, but that doesn't apply in this case. I mean, it would have been one thing if the president said, let's shoot down munitions or militias in Iran that are threatening our troops. But to go after the second or third ranking person in Iran, it doesn't strike me as self-defense against an imminent attack.
Some of your colleagues on the Hill across the political aisle have said that no, they felt like that imminent threat, as you're kind of talking about, was present in the briefings yesterday. Not everybody, though, from the opposite political party. Just a quick reaction to that, because those briefings were going on for House members in the Senate yesterday as we learned details about why Soleimani was taken out.
Well, I don't want to go into the classified briefings, but here's what I can say. The administration has offered no public details about when the attack was going to take place, where it was going to take place.
Well, no, because you just said they're classified.
Well, but here's what they could say. Why couldn't they strike particular militia or munition warehouses. Why couldn't they capture Soleimani? There is no justification for why they had to kill him and why they had to act without coming to Congress. I mean, this didn't strike anyone in the public as urgent in a way that they couldn't have gotten congressional authorization.
Well, we don't know exactly what we're striking in the public yet, do we? I'm wondering what will come about when we know all of the details. But in the meanwhile, how will you vote? And I'm guessing I know the answer, but just to get you on the record, how will you vote on the War Powers Authorization?
Well, I will vote for the War Powers Authorization. I expect, by the way, people like Matt Gaetz and some Republicans to join us. And it's important to know on the War Powers Resolution, it does not restrict the president from taking action on self-defense. That the commander-in-chief has that right as president of the United States. What it restricts is the president to take offensive action in Iran. Real quickly, this just came in. The minority leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, saying this. Let's watch.
Today's War Powers Resolution cannot become law. By definition, it will never be sent to the president, and it will never limit his constitutional authority to defend the American people. It is a concurrent resolution. This is a type of resolution that we invite the soapbox derby to the Capitol. This is a meaningless vote that only sends the wrong message.
And a bit more from the former National Security Advisor here, tweeting, the 1973 War Powers Resolution is unconstitutional. It reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Constitution allocated foreign affairs authority between the President and Congress. The resolution should be repealed. Congressman Khanna, your reaction?
Well, the resolution passed by bipartisan majorities in 1973, Republicans and Democrats, and there have been Republicans like Senator Lee, Matt Gaetz, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan in the past who have voted for War Powers resolutions to restrict the president in Yemen. But to Leader McCarthy's point, we also have a bill that would defund any offensive action in Iran. Congress has the power of the purse. That's not a meaningless resolution. Congress can defund any offensive action, and we plan to do so. In fact, Matt Gaetz and I had a bill in the National Defense Authorization that would have done that. We're going to have a vote on that bill again in the House.
Bipartisan on that. Meanwhile, foreign policy expert Ian Bremmer, who says he is far from a Trump supporter, had this to say.
The United States has killed the head of Iran's military in the cabinet, and the response has been, virtually nothing. That doesn't mean that Iran is no longer a major antagonist of the United States in the region, but this is a win for Trump, and it's clear that it is.
Congressman?
Well, I hope there won't be a response. I mean, I'm glad that no Americans were killed. I hope we can ratchet down the rhetoric and have a ceasefire. But to the point on Iran's power, I mean, Iran is 0.44% of global GDP. We're at 21%. China's at 15%. I think a lot of Americans are scratching their heads and saying, why do we care? Why is Iran or the Middle East relevant? They're 3.5% of the world economy. We're energy independent. Let's focus on building our own country. And there's bipartisan sentiment that we should focus here at home and not be a policeman for the world.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it today. As we go to commercial break, there is more that we are learning now about that plane crash, the Ukrainian.
We caught a total monster. We took him out, and that should have happened a long time ago. We did it because they were looking to blow up our embassy. We also did it for other reasons that were very obvious. Somebody died. One of our military people died. People were badly wounded just a week before, and we did it.
President Trump there a short while ago at the White House defending the U.S. airstrike that killed top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. This is a commander with Iran's Revolutionary Guard is warning that they will take, quote, harsher revenge soon, end quote. Jennifer Griffin has more from the Pentagon. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it appears that that's for domestic consumption inside Iran, Harris, but there has been a shift in messaging from the Trump administration about whether the U.S. believes Iran was intentionally trying to avoid killing Americans in those missile strikes 2 nights ago.
There's no doubt in my mind that when the Iranians fired those missiles, they were intending to kill Americans.
Originally, officials told us that they believe the Iranians warned the Americans through the Iraqis and also basically were pounding sand. Now, the shift began when the U.S. military's top officer, after seeing the latest battle damage assessment, told reporters here at the Pentagon late yesterday an early warning system tipped off American forces about the pending missile strike from Iran, sending U.S. troops to shelters, which saved lives. But General Mark Milley went on to say, make no mistake, Iran's goal was to avenge Qasem Soleimani and to kill American troops.
I believe, based on what I saw and what I know, is that they were intended to cause structural damage, destroy vehicles and equipment and aircraft, and to kill personnel.
Vice President Pence said today he believes Iran is telling its Shiite proxy militias not to attack U.S. targets. President Trump downplayed the impact of the missile strike in his address to the nation.
We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
Until General Milley spoke late yesterday, Pentagon officials had privately said Iran wanted to avoid killing Americans, a message echoed in Tehran today from Iranian commanders. U.S. officials tell me the U.S. military did not attempt to shoot any of the Iranian missiles down because they did not have Patriot anti-missile systems in place at the two bases. The message from Iran's leaders also shifting today after President Rouhani said that the retaliation for the strike against Soleimani was complete after those 16 ballistic missiles were fired. Now, a Revolutionary Guard commander, as you mentioned, says he'll take harsher revenge soon. Here in the U.S., authorities are warning of the possibility of terror and cyber attacks coming from Iran. Harris?
Yeah, that's so interesting what you say. The harsher rhetoric on their part may be for the internal politics in their own country. Good to see you, Jennifer. Thank you. I want to bring in now Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and co-chair of the House Republican Israel Caucus. The congressman also served in Iraq and is a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. Good to see you. Always thank you for your service.
Great to see you.
Let's first of all just react to some of Jennifer's reporting right then and the point that she was making that I reiterated, that, you know, that the rhetoric may change inside Iran because they've got to do a calculus now that includes a lot of people, not the ones on the streets, but those other millions of people, citizens that don't agree. They don't want more sanctions. They do want outside help from the world, or at least attention.
Yeah, the regime in Iran, it really has been beholden to hardliners. There are people in Iran, IRGC specifically, and their supporters, where they want a stronger stance. They want to hear death to America, death to Israel. They call Israel the little Satan and America the great Satan. When Iran was engaged and has been engaged in all these destabilizing activities throughout the Middle East, there's a portion of the Iranian populace that encourages that and props up this regime because of it. Now, you also point out that there are also millions of Iranians who want stability, peace, freedom, prosperity. That's a different direction for Iran that they should be pursuing going forward. But to your question about what you might hear at times for domestic consumption, we've heard in the past, we're hearing it now, we may continue to hear it in the future, where they say some awful things that are outrageous to us, and some of the messages really aren't meant for us as much as to those hardliners that keep them in power.
You know, I love having you on the program because I haven't been able to ask anybody else this question. You served inside Iraq, and I'm curious, how are they making the choice to let Iran do something inside their country and not choose us? You know, you saw on Twitter the president, you know, basically telling them, you have to help protect the bases where Americans are housed. Why should he even have to say that?
Right, and you also have Iraqi soldiers at these locations with U.S. troops. You have, as you know, different types of people who are in the Iraqi government. There are some who strongly oppose Iran, have in the past, they do currently. You have others who in a way have evolved into Iranian proxies themselves. They are beholden to Iran. In some cases, they are aligned in a positive way for their relationship. Others, it's negative. They're doing it because they're scared. They fear, whether it's for their life, for their family's life, where they have to take these positions that provide Iran cover. So even I think under the Shia leaders inside of the Iraqi government, you have to break that down into people who might actually sympathize with Iran and others who are just sympathizing because they fear it.
I'll move to this. Most House Republicans are praising yesterday's Iran briefing, saying it clearly explained the strike that killed Iran's top general. But on the Senate side, President Trump's allies, like Mike Lee and Rand Paul, went after it.
The briefing lasted only 75 minutes, whereupon our briefers left. This, however, is not the biggest problem I have with the briefing, which I would add was probably the worst briefing I've seen, at least on a military issue, in the 9 years I've served in the United States Senate.
I see no way in the world you could logically argue that an authorization to have war with Saddam Hussein has anything to do with having war with people currently in Iraq.
Meanwhile, the president had this reaction to his GOP critics.
I get along great with Mike Lee. I've never seen him like that. But other people have called and they've said it was the best presentation they've ever seen. We killed a man who killed many, many Americans and many, many people.
Look, I know you're not in the Senate, but that has to be being talked about on Capitol Hill today. I mean, Mike Lee spoke for quite some time.
Yeah, so on the House side, I haven't heard that from any of my Republican colleagues who were in the House briefing, which I was in as well. I thought the briefing was fantastic.
Were they that different?
I don't know what was different. I wish I could have, I could be able to answer that question having also sat in on the Senate briefing. But what I'll tell you is this, that what you know, what all of your viewers know about Qasem Soleimani's past with the hundreds of people that he killed, with the thousands more that were wounded, the people who were recently killed and wounded, the attack on the embassy, and even the IRGC put out a statement right after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, where even they acknowledged that Qasem Soleimani was in Iraq for confrontation against Americans.
Before I let you go, I want to get this in here. I don't know if you were able to hear it or not, but Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, was on with me just a few minutes ago, and he was talking about bipartisan movement with some of your colleagues there in the House. So you got that going on in the Senate with some pushback on the briefing yesterday, but he says, no, guys like Matt Gaetz might go with him on a war powers resolution. What are you hearing?
I haven't heard that. I will say that consistently you have some Republicans through the years, through the administrations, where they believe that there is an important point in time when there is escalation at all with any other nation that Congress should have an increased role to play. The Congress has powers under Article 1. The President has powers under Article 2, and it is under those powers of Article 2. That's one of two things that were cited, the other being the 2002 AUMF. The President cited Article 2, and that's where, my opinion, if you are going to kill 600 U.S. troops and wound thousands of others and commit all of those acts and having the other planning for attacks going forward, I have no problem with you resting in pieces because you just got blown up by our government for the best of reasons. When Nancy Pelosi talks about the word disproportionate, at what point is it proportionate? How many more troops have to die? How many more have to get wounded? But as far as my Republican colleagues go and their philosophy as far as Article 1, I respect them for it. Unfortunately, it is just without any teeth, it's a press release. They're just trying to punch the president in the face with this resolution, and that's why I think a lot of Republicans who would normally be inclined to support an effort like this don't want anything to do with it, and we'll see what happens with the debate and the floor vote.
Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, thank you very much.
Thank you, Harris.
Joe Biden reportedly is growing increasingly worried about attacks by Bernie Sanders' campaign as the Iowa caucuses are just days away. Is Sanders a real threat to him? Plus, President Trump sounding off on witnesses he wants to see testify.
I would like to hear Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Adam Shifty Schiff, and some others. The informer that never showed up. Once I released the transcript, you know what happened. The informer, he never showed up. If we do that, I would like to have those people, plus others, testify, because it's the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the United States government.
President Trump saying he wants witnesses at his impeachment trial. This as Speaker Pelosi faces mounting pressure inside her own party to deliver those articles of impeachment to the Senate. Here's Pelosi.
In terms of impeachment, you will keep asking me the same question. I keep giving you the same answer. As I said right from the start, we need to see the arena in which we are sending our managers. Is that too much to ask? No, I'm not holding indefinitely. I'll send them over to where I'm ready. And that will probably be soon.
At least 8 Democratic senators now, that list is growing, are saying that the delay accomplished the goal of sparking a conversation about fairness. However, they are ready to proceed with a trial now. Our panel scoots in Brian Brentberg, Executive Vice President and Chair of Business and Finance at King's College in New York. Jason Nichols, Professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland. All right, a couple of academia members. Good to see you both. Jason, I'm going to start with you. How hot is that pressure on Speaker Pelosi now to move on?
I think she stated it best where she said she'll do it when she's ready. I don't think she's feeling any kind of pressure. I personally agree with those senators who say turn the articles over, the goal has been accomplished, and even some unintended goals have been accomplished in terms of putting Mitch McConnell on the hot seat. And we know that he is facing a really tough race against Amy McGrath in 2020 in Kentucky. He is the least popular senator in the entire Senate.
I don't know what that has to do with getting the articles of impeachment.
I think it has a whole lot to do with it because, as we said, the goal to be accomplished was to put fairness out there and witnesses, and the person who has said that he's not going to be fair is Mitch McConnell. And I think that putting that out there has hurt Mitch McConnell in some ways.
Brian?
No, I disagree. I don't think McConnell's in the hot seat at all. He's finding himself in a really powerful position that he probably can't even believe he's in. And Speaker Pelosi here, you could see it in the press conference. I think she's increasingly just doesn't know what to do with this. She has Democratic congressmen, in her party in the House coming out this morning and saying we need to move on. She quickly put the kibosh on that, but in the Senate where she has less power, it's clear there's a growing list of people who are saying this is not working out. Whatever you thought you were going to achieve, it's not working out, and we've got to move on because we're losing momentum.
So, it's interesting. It's not just a growing list. I mean, senior senators, Democrats, Senator Blumenthal has said it is time for Pelosi to transmit those articles. He does say her delay has had its benefits. Watch.
What I've heard from my Democratic colleagues very emphatically is profound respect for the Speaker's decision. She has waited, and the result has been additional evidence, John Bolton's offer of testimony, the documents revealed by Just Security, showing the president's direct involvement in withholding aid. There is likely to be more evidence.
So, Jason, is he saying that the case that apparently Democrats have had a difficult time making in the public at times, just keeping it streamlined, if you will, that case is stronger now?
I think what he's saying is that there's more evidence out there that we need to know and that we need to hear from witnesses like John Bolton. And, there's also
ways to accomplish that. Because I want to shave off just a little bit of time, though. If you think you won't get them, because Nancy Pelosi says, well, we want to see what the arena's like. Do we have any reason, Brian, to think that Senator McConnell isn't coming real when he says we're going to follow the rules of Clinton? We'll see about those witnesses, but not now.
Yeah, look, I think he's being very honest about that. We know the arena. It's the Senate. The Constitution gives the Senate the ability to try impeachment, and McConnell is going to run this thing the way that he thinks is right. He's doing it in the public eye, which means he has to do it in a way that looks legitimate, but the Speaker has been looking for leverage in the Senate that she does not have, and when you hear Blumenthal and others saying that she's done her job, what they're really saying is there's nothing left to get here. This didn't work, and it's starting to hurt us.
I cut you off real quickly, Jason.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would say is that she can also still subpoena John Bolton. John Bolton said he would comply with a subpoena, so even if the articles go over to the Senate, she can still subpoena him in the House and still get the information. We're still getting new information about what happened, and I think that that's really important.
All right, good to see you both. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot. Happy New Year, Brian. Happy New Year.
Thank you. President Trump has launched an aggressive re-election push starting today in the crucial swing state of Ohio, which he won 4 years ago. Can Democrats compete with his bully pulpit and This is Fox News Alert. Pentagon officials say they believe the Ukrainian passenger jetliner that crashed near Tehran Wednesday was shot down by mistake by Iran using a surface-to-air missile. That jetliner went down minutes after takeoff. 176 people on board died. And it happened the same night, within hours, Iran was firing those missiles at U.S. troops in Iraq. I want to bring in now Mike Boyd, aviation safety consultant and former pilot. He's president of Boyd Group International and has testified before Congress. Great to see you today. How much of this is kind of what you anticipated based on what you saw, evidence that you have witnessed?
Yeah, it looks very clearly. When there was no word from the cockpit, that means the cockpit was taken out, which is typical with a missile. And by the way, I'm not a pilot. The skies are a lot safer without me in the sky. But the fact of the matter is that this was very clearly something that something ballistic hit that airplane. It was obvious from the start, and there's only one group of people operating these kinds of things, and that's the Iranians.
You know, a couple of things are happening now. We are anticipating, there were no Americans on board, 63 Canadians and 82 Iranians and others, but Canada's Prime Minister in just the next few minutes is expected to address his people with regard to what's happened. So that's coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern. And Iran's head of civil aviation, according to Reuters, is dismissing the reports, Mike, of Ukrainian plane being hit by a missile as quote-unquote illogical rumors.
No, what's illogical is a terrorist bunch running Tehran. The reality of the whole thing, they came out a couple hours after the crash and said, we looked at the black boxes and a lot of it's been erased. They wouldn't know how to open the thing, let alone do that. They've been lying since the beginning of this thing. So anything that comes out of Tehran, it's at best very poor comedy.
Yeah, you know, right after, too, and the Wall Street Journal was asking questions about this just hours later, saying, well, you put out some statement that says you know what caused this plane to go down, something with its engine. How would you know that? Iranian officials walked that back a bit, still investigating, so on and so forth. What would you be looking at this point? Because they're not turning those black boxes over, at least not to us, a Boeing plane owned by Ukrainians, but we're probably not going to get them.
No, we're guaranteed we won't. But right now, keep in mind, the Ukrainians are going to be standing up and saying, not us. And it's going to be Boeing saying, not us. But what that means is Tehran just pulled a stunt that's going to isolate it from the rest of the global air transportation industry, because no airline in its right mind is going to want to get near that airport. 8.5 million people.
Why would there have been planes flying anyway at that point? I mean, we knew what was going on, you know, just a few hours before. What kind of directive would there have been that maybe someone didn't follow?
Well, Harris, that puts it right back in the laps of the airline, Ukrainian International. If they knew that at 4 hours before there was a missile barrage going back and forth, they really probably shouldn't have operated that flight at all into and out of Tehran. So you bring up a very good point that there's some culpability possibly with the airline ignoring a real and present threat. So that's something to look at.
Look, we do know from reporting that at least one couple was talking. A wife called her husband while being on board that plane, saying she was out in the region against U.S. troops, and she was worried about that plane taking off, and put that up on Instagram. So we know that at least people were concerned on that plane. Mike Boyd, thank you for your expertise and your time today.
Thank you.
A quick correction. In the last segment, we showed you a graphic picturing several senators. One of those photos showed Congressman Greg Murphy. It was supposed to show Senator Chris Murphy. Apologize for that error on behalf of our team. Moving on. Coming up, Prince Harry, Duchess Meghan, raising eyebrows across the pond with a big old announcement about their future. They're walking away from the royal family, at least in terms of any dollars. We'll talk about it.